Hi everybody, this is Rich, and you are watching This Imaginary Life, a post-game hangout show. And what the heck is it? Think of it like Car Talk, except for tabletop RPGs. We have decades of experience gathered here together. You're going to be amazed at what we're going to about to spew out. I'm going to bring on our wonderful co-host, all of my buddies from across the internet and across the, unfortunately, United States. We need to get a little intercontinental action going on here. So, I don't know, if you're a great GM and you can deal with our time zones, let me know. So first we have John Stavropoulos, who is way up in Eastern, and he's a New York time, and he's doing great, aren't you, John? How are things?
I'm doing really well. I actually have like a sun lamp right in front of my face so I can stay awake.
Nice, okay. And then also up in the New York Times is Judd Krallman, formerly a son of Cryos and an excellent GM, a big burning wheel enthusiast, and he can break your neck in like 12 different ways, all MMA style. How you doing, Judd?
No, not even close. I'm a librarian. That's all I am.
He's a librarian who can cradle your neck.
Who can give you information about how to
Go to sleep fastly.
Pour books into your brain. Then we have Stacy Dell'Orfano, Stacy of Contessa, and oh my goodness, there's like 1,000 billion things that you do, and for some reason Contessa is the only thing I'm thinking of right now.
That's okay.
Voices, geeky voices carry.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Always makes me think of Till Tuesday.
The zing.
Oh,
Is
Geeky Voices carry randomosity. Art of the game now, which is on Bleeding Cool, and I'm writing a game. And I'm sure there's other things.
That's right. Precious Dark.
Right.
Which didn't screw up this time?
Nope, you didn't. Perfect.
And then next we have Strash Achinovic, who is currently working on a giant mecha awesome game that the character sheet looks so cool. How are you doing, Strash?
Doing well. Actually, closed beta started this week, so.
Closed beta, which is basically just a kind of techie way of saying you don't get to play this game right now unless I know you.
Yeah. Mostly what it's saying is actually I don't want to show it to the entire public without first getting a couple of eyeballs on it.
Fair enough. And then last but not least, we have Lowell Francis of Play on Target, and he's like a mega star from the VirtuaCon follow-up, which is the Reluctant PandaCon that's ongoing right now. How are you doing, Lowell?
I am doing just fine. My computer hates me, but I'm here.
That's okay. I did my restart before we started recording, so, you know. Little tech tip. I don't know. So we have one particular header, but we're going to start off, as Judd had suggested, we start off with all the positivity. So now we're going to break down what is a lot of people, so we're definitely got to stick to the 2 minutes, right, or this is going to go long. We're going to do 2 minutes of what we're into. So that's where you get 2 minutes straight. We're timing it. Judd's got a super high-tech timer this time. We've upgraded with all of the monies that we don't have. And so 2 minutes is all you get. 2 minutes flat. Who wants to step up first?
I will. I'll get it over with.
Go for it, Stacey.
Let me go. I don't know what I'm going to say. Okay.
Awesome. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, so I guess the biggest thing that I'm doing is we're relaunching Contessa within the next about 2 weeks, starting with redesigning the blog and redoing it entirely. And we actually have an editorial staff now, and we actually have planned posts, and we actually have series of articles, and people who are going to be coming back and writing over and over again, and things like that. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to go through, I'm actually going to build us some forums and an actual kind of a social networking site for Contessa.
Oh, no.
A little bit. And what else? I've had a long break of nothingness because of lots of work, and I feel like my gaming life is jumping into gear super duper fast. I am going to be GMing Precious Dark, the game that I'm writing, for a group of all women players starting on December 10th. So that should be interesting to see if it gets through the holidays. And we're going to be doing it live on air because I'm doing it as a part of the Contessa blog. What I call my fail fast method of game development, and I just kind of want to show it off to other people. And randomosity is still there in the background, but I have so many other priorities right now that it's been sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'll give you 30 seconds back. That's all I got.
That's great stuff. That's fantastic. All right, go ahead and stop it, or reset it, or do some kind of thing with the thing. Oh, he's shake it tight. It's like an edge. So thanks, Stacy. That's really exciting. Yeah, Contessa is great. That's coming up when, like February timeframe again, or January?
Well, the first big thing we're going to do is launching the blog, and then after that we'll be thinking about actually when we're going to have events and when those are going to start kicking in again.
All right. Very well. We'll be patient. So who wants to go next? I'm ready to go if nobody else wants.
Bring it on.
Start me up, Judd. I am ready to go. I'm actually going to click on the timer just so I know. I've got 0 hours and 2 minutes, and we are going to hit... Are we hitting start? Oh, my goodness. There we go. All right. So first of all, I'm pretty excited that I recently appeared on one of my personal favorite podcasts, which is called the Jankcast, and I talked about Play-by-Forum. They put out like 4 episodes since then, so you got to go back in the catalog. But what was cool about it is that I actually convinced Todd Nicholas from the Jankcast, hey, why don't you try Play-by-Forum out? And so I've started last week. I started a Lady Blackbird game over Play-by-Forum, and which is kind of cool because I'm utilizing the medium of play-by-post, and so some of the flashbacks are happening concurrently in other threads on the same forum as the live action, which is kind of cool. Weird and hinky about the refresh time. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out Lady Blackbird. It's a free download and super awesome. Also, I've been a production assistant for Dr. Tom the Frog, and his show is coming soon. I'm pretty excited about that. And this past Wednesday, I met a live gamer face-to-face who, after we had dinner, he said, I want to be playing story games, and I want to get a group together of actual people in a meet space who have to like drive to a place to play games. And I'm 2 years out of practice. I'm a little nervous about having to bathe, and I can't remember all the social norms of going to someone's house to play a game. So I'm going to have to read up on the internet about that. And my last 30 seconds, I'm gonna pat myself on the back because I'm so happy that I contributed my piece for the Indie Plus anthology. So we got 500 YouTube subscribers now as part of that anthology, and I wrote a little Apocalypse World setting called Sector, and I was supposed to write it in 1 to 2 pages, and unfortunately it's 7 pages long. But it's being edited. And that's my 2 minutes. So who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
All right, Lowell.
All right, so I got to watch for the timer. Okay. He starts the timer. So I went to Metatopia, showed some games off there, and I'm working on revising some of the stuff that I took to there. So I'm playing around with that. That was the first time I went to that, and that was a learning experience. I'm working on the list of the history of post-apocalypse games, and that's about maybe 20% of the way through. I've got those posted on the blog. Campaigns are going well. I've got about 4 campaigns running face-to-face and 1 online that I'm running, and those are going decently. Actually, I just finished the session up before I came here to do this, and we've been off for a few weeks and thought it went pretty well. We're playing Target. We're trying to do more GM jams where we get GMs together for a particular game to talk about what it's like to run that game, to talk about how you pitch the game, what are the challenges of it. We've done that with Amber, Lord of the Gossamer Shadow, and we've done that with Changing the Lost. I'm trying to get people together for one for Apocalypse World, one for All Flesh Must Be Eaten, and then eventually Legend of the Five Rings. Essentially, I want to get games that have a very distinctive setting that people always ask about, like on Reddit and stuff. How do you get into it and get GMs to talk about that? So that's something I'm working on with the Play on Target group. That's it. That's all I got on my list.
All right, so we've given 50 seconds back to the kitty, which we've used up with our new timer. So we've got John and we've got Strash. Who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Oh, Strash, go!
All right. Things that I'm excited about, things that I'm doing. I actually missed Metatopia, so I'm super sad about that, actually. But real life kind of got in the way. However, stuff's happening kind of in a big way. I mentioned earlier that beta for my game is kind of coming together. I've got a demo first test, and I actually had some pretty awesome feedback. I've been doing the standard thing where I actually do feedback with people on their games. Most recently, I've been talking to Jonathan Lavallee, and we're doing what we call the Great Game Exchange, where we throw games at each other and read and critique it. Home campaigns, AR, Atlas Reckoning, has actually got a campaign going on Tuesday, and it's really funny because I told them, I was like, all right, guys, we're done with the playtest. Thank you for playing. They're like, F that, we're going to keep going. So I got a couple games queued up that are waiting for that to finish, and then we got a campaign on Saturdays. Really excited about trying out the new Blades in the Dark iteration, which is Guild of Thieves, John Harper game, and I'm looking forward to playing some By the Book, which is a Mark Diaz Truman Apocalypse World hack where you play with 4 people. Each pair is a pair of cops, and you're investigating crimes in a slightly weird kind of supernatural Gotham-like city, which is it's pretty cool. It emulates police procedurals and talks a lot about corruption in the system and stuff. It's really neat, and I'm very excited to give it a try. So that's pretty much what's going on here. I'm going to throw 15 seconds back into the kitty.
All right, great job, Strash. Exciting stuff. Oh, and during the time, John has painted his nails to be extra presentational for the next 2 minutes. So John, you ready to go?
I am.
Go for it.
Bam. So I've been going to convention after convention after convention, and I feel like there's none left. And I'm confused. I'm like, what do I do if I'm not going to conventions? But my birthday's coming up soon, and I kind of don't like my birthday. So what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to volunteer, do volunteer work instead of actually doing anything birthday-wise. And I was researching a bunch of different things I could do, and one of them is actually running events at libraries. So I don't mean to step on Judd's toes at all, but it looks like I'm going to be running some games at some local libraries for a bunch of after-school kids, which I'm very excited about. So what else is going on? I have a bunch of freeform LARP game scenarios that I've been running at various conventions that are currently being edited, and I'm very excited to see what the end result of that is. We just came back from Metatopia. Metatopia was amazing for a lot of reasons, but the thing that I was most excited about was a contest called Golden Cobra, and you can go check it out at goldencobra.org. And essentially what that was is at Gen Con, I co-organized Games in Demand. At Gen Con, there was a lot of demand for 2-hour games. A lot of people show up and they're like, I don't have a lot of time, there's a lot going on, I want to play for 2 hours, I don't want to play for 4. And we just didn't have enough games that fit 2-hour slots and also fit a variable number of players. Sometimes we would have 3 people, sometimes we would have 8, sometimes 10, so on and so forth. So partly the Golden Cobra contest was secretly a contest to develop games that we could run at next year's Games on Demand at Gen Con so that we could fulfill that demand. And I think that's it.
one would think with this high tech that maybe we should shave 30 seconds off of that. Can we program the iPad to do a 90-second timer next time, maybe?
That's not technologically possible.
Are you just trying to cut 30 seconds off from Judd? Is that what you're trying to do?
I see what he's doing.
Yeah. That seems unfair.
First, John.
My own petard.
First, John doesn't come to volunteer at the library that I manage, and now this. It's just a disappointing evening.
All right, well, let's jump into the main topic. The topic was suggested.
Are you gonna let Judd go? Rich.
Judd, do you want to be mad? No. Oh, he gets the timer. Here we go. All right, here we go. 2 minutes. I'm a horrible person. I apologize, Judd.
It's okay. We could.
No, let's do the 2 minutes. I've got a timer. You get your own. Go.
All right. Go. Hit the go. It still says 2 minutes. Time is frozen.
You don't say 2 minutes until 1 minute. As long as you see the blinky, it's good.
Good.
It's a terrible timer.
We're in the Stone Ages. Why don't you just drop sand from one container into another?
Lose all your time, dude.
I wasted 30 seconds, so there we go.
Hold on, I'm starting over.
I'm playing no, don't start over. Don't you start over.
I already did. You're done. Go.
Unforgiving. I'm playing a game of D&D, the new edition. I like it. It's fun. The monster manual, I think, is my favorite part. I love the little notes, the in-game notes from the world. They're kind of stuck on the pages. Not literally stuck, but stuck through layout. I think it's just really fun. It makes me want to have a monster manual that is entirely an in-game artifact that we can just hand to players and be like, listen, this is what adventurers have compiled. You know, figure it out. That players can like write notes in. I just think that'd be really fun. The other game I'm running is over Google Hangouts. So the D&D game is actually face-to-face, which is just fun. The Burning Wheel game is with just two people, Rachel and Drew, and it is Google Hangouts. It's a game using the Pathfinder Kingmaker adventure path to make a campaign. I just thought Paizo was doing so much cool stuff. I wanted to find a way to use one of their cool-looking products, and so I thought and I'm fascinated with published adventures. So I grabbed their Hexcrawl Kingmaker, and we're burning wheeling it, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Kingmaker is neat. There's a lot of stuff I think in that process that you have to throw away, but that's okay. I'm happy. I'm comfortable with that. We had a player character die last week. A demonic bear pretty much swiped him into a state of heavy bleeding, and no one who was present could stop the bleeding, so they just kind of watched him bleed to death, which was fun. It was good for a game that for a setting that's kind of a I don't know, LSD soaked leather stocking tales. So fun, and we're done.
Nice. I remember distinctly in one game where someone botched a first aid roll in a fantasy setting, and then the paladin came along and looked at the guy. He actually RP'd the failure. He said, "What are you doing? Why are raisins in this wound?" I love that quote. The raisins in the wound to heal it always cracks me up. So now everyone's gone. I don't want to screw up again because then I have to commit seppuku.
Thank you for letting me talk, Rich. I really appreciate it.
I'm sorry. Okay, secretly I've been wanting to do that for years.
Oh, I'm sure.
Pulled it off. It's my early Christmas present. So John Stavropoulos suggested this topic, but we have a follow-up that takes it to the next level. And so the topic is, John, lead us off, man. It's your thing. I don't want to steal your thunder.
What's the topic? Okay, great. The topic is, what are your GM weaknesses and what do you do about it? And the follow-up is, how do you know what your GM weaknesses are? Do we know who to credit for that?
Yes, Donna McCarthy was the person who followed up with that question. I think it's excellent, so thank you so much. So, who would like... Just freaking out because he was going to be the face of the rest of the Hangout if I didn't do a click of a button. So thanks, Judd.
You're welcome.
So let's...
I thought you were making up for forgetting about me earlier.
Judd Carlman Show. You're going to show up on the YouTube like the snapshot thing. So let's talk it through. How do you guys want to do this? Do you want to talk about each of the weaknesses, one person, kind of grab the forum and do the whole thing? Do we want to go one at a time and talk about ways that we try to combat each of those things?
One at a time, I think, maybe.
All right.
Yeah, that seems fair.
That way we don't have to remember what we were talking about before.
That's a good point.
Maybe inventory them first, or what do you think?
Oh, lol, take it away, man. You're so good at inventorization.
Oh, jeez. No, well, we've got a shared document, so I'm looking at a number of the things on the list, and there are many here that I recognize as I don't know things that I'm uncomfortable with. Judd mentioned dungeons, and that is certainly something that I'm really bad at. I feel like I don't enjoy doing combat, so I often find that's maybe the weakest part of my game at times. Sometimes I think that when I'm unsure about what people are doing, what their connection is, I tend to throw more plot things out, and perhaps I overcomplicate materials. That's a thing that worries me, and I feel might be a weakness. I also think I'm sometimes not as good as I ought to be about calling people on bullshit, on out-of-game comments and things like that, where we get to playing and they'll say something that I really ought to stop and be going, okay, wait, we need to not be doing that. I'm not as good about that as I think I ought to be, but, that's a lot of face-to-face stuff with people that I've got years with, but I still kind of think I'm weak on that. That's just some of the ones that are off the top of my head.
Lowell, can I ask you some questions about the overcomplicating?
Sure.
So is it that you just keep making up stuff and piling on, or is it that you have a situation pre-made that the players are uncovering and you find that is too complicated? Or is it that, yeah, I guess that's fine.
I would say sometimes when I do one-shots, I would say the latter, where I put too much stuff into a one-shot. But I think more when it's face-to-face campaign games, if I find that there's some empty space or some dead space or people don't know what to do, I'll throw new threads in, and then 7 or 8 sessions later, all of those birds come home to roost when no one knows exactly what's going on because I put so much material out there. For example, we've got a City Guards fantasy game, and I've got a few plots that I put out there, the cases that they can do that the sergeant has briefed them on, but then if they're uncertain, then I'll throw in an NPC that maybe is talking about something else, and there becomes a question of, okay, what's a red herring? What's actually going on related to it? And I have a hard time sometimes where I get too much stuff out there, and I haven't tied all of the threads together. Is that making sense?
Yeah. I think so. One thing that I've always wanted to do with a investigative game, particularly like a cop type game, is have things where I did it a bit with Cold City, where the players for the first game they just got a bunch of files dumped on their desk and they had to investigate. But my hope would be in a campaign is that cases would just go cold, and you'd have to put them away. So don't be scared to be like, well, the case went cold. It just happens. File it away, and maybe if a player. And then you can have those. You can find the time and the place to do that, especially if it's a face-to-face game where only one player shows up, and it's like, hey, you've got this case that's a year old. Go talk to the witnesses. See if you stir up anything new.
Can I add to that, Joe?
Yeah, please.
So I've done things like that, and I think it's a great idea. I think that it's also useful to reinforce it physically if you can. So, for example, like you might have cold cases that go cold, but if we don't remember them, right, it's as if they never existed. So a lot of times I like to think of if we're playing an ongoing campaign, depending on the style of game, let's say there's unanswered questions is how I like to think of things. So I'll put every unanswered question on an index card, lay them on the table, and the ones that are going cold that people don't seem to gravitate towards, put them in a file. But people can always come back and look at them and pick up on them later if they like. You can also
that's a really good
survey
idea.
people, right? So you can actually like put all the unanswered questions on the table, look to your group and say, which of these things are you interested in? And then that way you can focus on what exactly you're going to do.
Yep. Having an actual, if it's a modern day game, having an actual file would be a way to go too. Especially if you've got, I downloaded a bunch of old pictures from the 40s and 50s and had those as our perps and our witnesses and our suspects, and having those pictures really, really, really helped because it gave everything just this kind of, visual weight. So yeah, I mean, with the piling on, I guess my advice would be to not be scared to have a case go cold. Everything doesn't have to be a conspiracy that links together, unless that's your game. If that's your campaign, then you need to pile it on.
And you make an interesting point. It had occurred to me that there's a double benefit there for the GM and the player about doing those index cards with the plots. Is the GM, you see the concrete plots that you've written out, so you organize those, and maybe you realize, okay, I should go back to one of those things, and then the players also have the concrete measure of that. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that at all. That's great.
I actually have one more thing. One of the things that we've actually started seeing mechanisms for in games recently is that whenever you feel like you don't have firm footing about where the players are going or what they're doing, just start asking them questions. Like, if you look at something like, Swords Without Master, that's usually where you drop the whole discovery phase in. And, that's ask provocative questions, build on the answers is definitely the Apocalypse World. It's definitely the Apocalypse World sort of like motto there. And so feel free to like, one of the things that I do is whenever I feel like I'm not 100% certain and my footing is not firm, like I know vaguely where things are going, but I want to kind of figure out sort of like the direction that we're headed, I just start asking people questions. And so like if you start saying, like, hey, so who do you know at the front? How are you tied to them? Are you worried about their well-being now that you hear from these guard people that there might be like a goblin attack or whatever? I don't know what what exactly your style of game is, but yeah, the that there is definitely something that's super useful. And since we were talking about cases and cold cases, I was going to actually bring up By the Book, which I mentioned earlier, which is the Mark Diaz True Man game. That is definitely one where cases go cold. And if you can't keep linking things together, you're eventually going to run out of threads to follow, and either you have to turn it over to the DA, bury it, or in that particular game, you can turn it over to the Mask. There's a Batman-like character that will solve the crime for you, but the city loses faith in its police force. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of intense. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, no, Strash, go on. I thought.
No, I'm good. What I'm basically saying is that game in particular really kind of the idea that they're talking about letting cases go cold. Until recently, I was always of the opinion that the players will always find everything out, and you gotta tell the story and everything. But yeah, I think it definitely reinforces the idea that sometimes not everything is solved, and particularly if you have a character piece, like if you're playing something that's really about the people that are solving the crimes more so than it is about the crimes themselves. I think that's definitely a way to go because that'll change people more so than the cases that they do solve. So.
Yeah.
A couple thoughts, Lowell. The first one is, if you like the kind of game where there might be some NPC rivals, I've found some value in somebody else solved your case, dude. They got a lead and they plucked it out. If it's something they're not interested in and you just want to kind of move the world forward or show that it's an entire group of people that are working on particular plot threads, it's a way to go. Then to dovetail off of what Strash was saying, in the Primetime Adventures game that I played in that was incredibly awesome with Scott White and Sean Nittner and Leonard Balsera, we had entire episodes where there was a case going on in the background and we kind of solved it, but it really was the relationships. Like there was dead body, but it was just like set dressing, and the case was progressing forward, but it was really about the character relationship. So yeah, Strash hit the nail on the head. That's a really fun way to do it. And you can progress those plot lines forward. I think we cornered you into saying it's all about cases, which I don't know if that was your premise at all. It was probably not, but
No, but I think it applies. most of what I do is putting threads out there for players to do. I rarely do a kind of a straight line thing, but I often put too many threads out there.
Cool.
Yeah, I call that Claremontonian plotting because I do the same
That would be if I talked the whole page.
thing. Nice. I want to go with one. So I call this one speed lines. So you ever read like manga or seen particular types of cheap kids cartoon shows? Oh my goodness, Stacy's back. So Stacy's internet went down. So we lost her for a little bit, but it looks like she may be able to rejoin us. So like the Dragon Ball Z thing or the different kind of show where it shows the character and then there's like no background. It's just the dude or the girl and the action pose. And so Stacy, to catch up, we're talking about what I call speed lines, which is the idea that there's a character within the frame of a particular TV show, but you really can't see anything behind them. It's just a color, or it's just the speed lines of their movement. That's kind of how I think of my ability sometimes as a GM to describe everything outside of the character that I portray. Like I drop into portraying one NPC, and I kind of forget where they're at, what else is going on. I'm just a player, just like everybody else, except I got an unlimited palette of NPCs that I could throw at you. So that's one of my flaws as a GM, and it's really fun for me.
Can I ask you a quick question? Why is it a flaw?
Why is it a flaw? Because people I have dealt with players that they like specificity, they like a sense of place. I occasionally, as a GM, because I'll drop behind the eyes of an NPC, I'm no longer doing the senses because it's just that dialogue. And if everything becomes about dialogue, to me, it feels a little floaty, kind of out in the air, and it doesn't necessarily have as much verisimilitude.
So, Rich, my recommendation is if you get stuck in that kind of situation, I think most people, not most people, I have heard people give recommendations to try to hit every sense in a scene, which I think is kind of ludicrous. But I think most people concentrate on sight. So if you get stuck, think about what the place smells like. Use a sense that maybe often gets neglected. What can you hear from the castle window? What does the gravel feel like?
I love smell personally.
Yep, smell's a good one. I think
Smell like, because mostly it smells disgusting wherever it is that you are.
All right. Adventuring is stinky business.
Yeah.
So and it's interesting because everything that you described was sight. Speed lines, manga. It's a very visual medium. So you can kind of break out of that and try a different sense, and rather than just what does this look like? Oh, I've got to describe something that looks so cool, and just no, you don't. You just have to bring them there for a second. So just take it easy. What kind of smells have you used, Stacey? Do you have a menu of stinky adventure smells?
Well, I think about things like where you are. If you're in an alley by the docks in San Francisco in 1869, it's probably going to really, really reek. And then you got to think about all those wonderful smells. What would be there? Let's see. Dead fish, lots and lots of body odor. Now, it depends on what you're doing exactly. Blood is pretty stinky. Being inside of dungeons, something that I think a lot of people ignore is the fact that if you're in a dungeon and you're beating the crap out of things, you're going to be covered in gore very, very quickly. And I think everybody imagines their characters as still as pristine as they were when they walked into the dungeon.
Yeah, I think we're reminding them of how being covered in gore is totally a great sense. It's a great way to bring them into the moment. That's awesome.
There's a thing actually from Unframed that I've been stealing that Vincent Baker has. It's just one of his bits from that book where he says that when you go to do sensory detail or description or something like that, you always put in one really sort of paradoxical or reversed or unusual detail about the character or the scene or something that it both forces you to go to another mode and do another descriptive mode, but it also gives the players a hook that they go, okay, well, why are his teeth perfect? Or why is his hair cut in this particular way? Why doesn't he have earrings in one ear and piercings everywhere else?
That's interesting.
And I will honestly say that little trick, the payoff I get at the table for just that little trick is amazing. It grabs players so much. It starts up whole new conversations, and it generates a lot of ideas for me. The simplest thing.
Nice.
Cool.
I mean, John and I are from New York City, so we've got a lot of smells we could bring to the table. Like pee and vomit and pee and something else we can identify.
I just want to say that I think the kind of games I like playing aren't necessarily the kind of games that Stacy.
They're not urine-based?
I don't like blood, sweat, pee-based games. It's
Get a lot.
You love body fluids? Damn.
When you're writing, one of the things they tell you is to try and include 2 separate sensory details. So if you describe something by sight, also trigger another one. So I don't know if I would go with all 5, but I think that the 2 rule has worked pretty well for me. And also look for a detail that'll be overlooked. Like if you walk into a coffee shop, the smell of coffee is obviously going to be there. But to notice the detail of like maybe something obscure about the clientele, maybe they're all like, music fans and sort of like sharing headphones between one another, or something small in the background that really kind of brings the scene to life and makes it feel a little bit more rich than just, well, we're in a dungeon, so obviously there's stones and there's some moss. If you pull out that tiny little detail, I think that people really kind of get into the scene a bit more.
I would add to this in that, so it depends on the type of game, let's say. So using myself as an example, if I'm running Dungeons & Dragons, or if I'm running Primetime Adventures, I'll describe the background very differently. So for example, in Dungeons & Dragons, I'll be thinking from a tactical perspective and thinking, okay, what are pitfalls in this dungeon? What are interactive pieces that players could actually use, right? So like I'll describe details that get them feeling immersed emotionally in what's going on, but also they give them opportunities and give them things to pay attention to or be careful of. If I'm running Primetime Adventures, I'll look at the issues of the characters that are the protagonists, and I'll have the backgrounds reflect the theme of those characters, right? So let's say a character's issue is like loneliness or something. I might describe the background as like a bar that seems empty, but you see all these drinks that were like half drank, right, on tables, and you have all these like indications that people were here, but they aren't anymore, right? So it's almost like it's a metaphor dream. It reflects what the thematic element of the game is. So it depends on the game.
Oh, you can also use the, riffing off what John just said, you can also use their character sheets. If they're a master swordsman, they might notice things that other people wouldn't. So, when you're, if you know that someone is the best at your table is the best swordsman who, of this age, then when someone's walking down the block towards them, you can say, yeah, they sidestep around a dog, and you realize that they have training. So that you can also use the character sheet to kind of inspire what the characters notice.
I mean, that's huge. Like, so if you're playing a thief character, you tell the thief, here are all the exits, right? If you're playing the fighter, you can immediately tell them who the toughest person here is, or what an obvious weakness might be. Like, you can look at each character and almost think, if we're looking at the scene from their perspective, as if the camera's in front of their character, what would they pay attention to?
Right. And you can do it just by, thinking about this in D&D terms, you can do it just by class, right? Like John and I are kind of doing. If you have a druid go into a city, be like, when this city was originally built, someone really thought nature was important. And in the last 50 years, that has fallen to the wayside. I'm not sure what happened. And then, boom, they're in that place. So anyway, I like the 2 cents rule. That's really good. Josh, that's really great. That's a good way to put it.
Excellent. You've solved all my problems. Let's move on to other problems. Who else has a sin that they wish to share their foibles?
How about, I don't know if anybody's brought this up yet, but pulling punches. Like,
ooh, good one.
Can't quite bring myself to kill off somebody's character. So if it looks like it's going to happen, I'll often do something, anything, to pull it away from that so that it actually won't.
I totally hear that.
What do you think makes you pull the punch? Like, what's going on when you do that?
Well, there's lots of things. There's first the idea that I don't want the player to dislike me because I just killed their character. Um, some people react really, really badly. I don't like the idea. Sometimes it's just the idea that it's going to bring down everybody in the group. It's like, oh no, so and so died. That sucks. What else? It's a lot of things. Sometimes I just don't like the way that a death would fit into a particular scene, so I rebel against the idea. What kind of punches have I pulled? I've fudged die rolls in the past. Suddenly the NPC that was fighting them will run away. Sometimes my favorite thing to do, though, is I almost always have an NPC around that is the GMPC. And the GMPC usually doesn't do anything. They don't really participate in combat. They tend to not do much at all. But if I need them to step in and kind of, either direct the party or prevent something horrible from happening, I will pull them in just to do that.
Stacy, if you want to put your forehead to the screen, I can absolve you of that. Touching the die roll. I'll just put my thing like this. I mean, there we go. You're absolved. The dice forgive you. I forgive you. John forgives you. Clearly.
No, nobody ever knew that I did that. Now everybody's going to be wondering.
Right.
I can quickly jump in and address one aspect of this, which is I feel like I try to make it very clear what the stakes of a role is in a game. So if it looks like if death looks like it's on the line, I'll make it really, really, really clear. Like I'll say it like 2-3 times in different ways, and I'll look the player right in the eyes. Like I'll get close to them. I'll be like, you can roll that die, but if you do and it goes this way, this is what's going to happen. And if you roll that way, I'm not doing it. Like, I'll put the die in their hand. I'll be like, you are the one making this happen right now. I am not responsible. And then if they don't like that, right, maybe the players can come up with some other way to handle the situation.
I think that's really important is I don't like killing players, but if killing characters unless they've walked into it.
Yeah.
They need to have gone into it sort of fully eyes wide open. And I think stating the stakes repeatedly so that they know, oh, we could have run away, or we could have done X or Y to get out of the situation.
I think I have done that once before. Actually, I told one of the players he was doing something very specific that was going to result in something very bad happening to his character. It was Changeling game. He was going to get pulled into the hedge again. And I said, just so you know, this is what is going to happen. Do you still want to continue with this path? And he said, yeah, and he went ahead and did it, and it actually turned out to be great. So there's an example when I didn't pull punches, and it turned out fantastic.
Nice.
So
I think one thing that I'm sorry, Stretch, go.
No, go ahead.
No, I want you to go.
Stretch, go.
So there's like two things. The first one is I highly recommend playing some high lethality games. So doing the DCC funnel or playing something like Warhammer, where you're going to go through like a dozen characters in the span of a campaign, that starts desensitizing you. And once people start like realizing what the stakes are, it's pretty important, because I'm a firm believer that you can't have heroism unless the threat is real. Because like if you're in a world where you're protected, like if you're living in Hollywood and they're telling you, hey, you're the hero, so you're protected and you're not going to die no matter how stupid you do things. That's one thing. Like D&D has like this, let's talk about 4th Ed. Has a little bit of a weak threat rule, right? Where like fights aren't supposed to kill you. Like if you're playing up to the EL level, it's supposed to use up resources. But like in games that actually have that threat of death, when you make the choice, when you're like, yes, I know I'm going to die, but I need to do this, and this is important, and you pick up the dice, there's a lot more emotional weight to it. The player feels like more invested. So yeah, you can lower the reflex to sort of dodge by playing a lot of high lethality games. The other thing that I recommend, and this is really funny, this is an old LARP trick. Back in Pittsburgh, we had this thing called the ice cream rule, and it spread all over the place. I used to run. I'm about to show my age here, but I used to run really big vampire games, and so people would scheme against each other, and sometimes you'd see characters of like 3 to 4 years just get absolutely obliterated in a kill box. And the rule was, if you kill somebody's character, you take him out for ice cream afterwards. That
I
helps
like
solve
that.
a lot of feelings. Right, so like, in character, the two of you might be like inches apart and like going into like horrible frenzies and whatever, but like the moment the game is over, you bring it back out of game, and you get somebody some ice cream, and they can't hate you forever, and it's great.
I like that.
The other thing that I do, because I have that too. I have that anxiety about killing somebody's character. Is right as you're setting up the game, as everybody's making up characters, say, listen, if I'm thinking about like a changeling game, right? Where people might take some time and make a big backstory and be like, listen, folks, if your character dies, that's totally cool. It'll be fun. We'll have a big funeral and it'll be a blast. And until you come up with another character idea, you'll play a page of the court, or one of the duke's sons, or something like. Give them a concrete thing. This is what's going to happen if your character dies. You're still in the game. We still love you. You just failed because you're a failure, and that's okay. Not everyone can be a winner. But no, seriously, if you demystify the process and just say, hey, this is what's going to happen if you die, and it also is your way of saying it's on the table, it's on. By doing that, you're telling the players, you could die, that could happen, and if you do, I have a plan.
You're setting expectations, right? What you're like at the beginning of game, the beginning of campaign, when you guys get together, whatever you're doing, you're saying, here are the things on the table, here's how we will handle these things, right? It's similar to like, how do we handle when we get the rules wrong, or how do we handle when we make this mistake or do that? You just talk about it, and then as long as everyone's on the same page, it makes people feel a little bit better because they don't feel blindsided and they know that they're just not going to be taken out of the situation socially. They're still involved. They know their options. They know their choices.
Well, and I would say the other thing to consider is that there are worse things than death.
Thank you.
And that is what my players know, is that death is easy. Death is the easy way out. I will destroy the things you love. I will destroy the things you care about. That is how I will put you up on the meat hooks and give you the consequences for your failure. The friends you've made, the context you've built, the structure you've developed, the things you've acquired, those are all fair game. That's another alternative to death.
Thank you. Yeah. Apocalypse World taught me a lot about being harder, and I've still got a bit to go, but because I have players in my play-by-4 message me like, you sure you don't want to go a little harder on my... It's okay. My character's life can suck. Bring it, Rich. But generally, being able to look at those moves and giving me different ways to think about how I can approach, just like the 5 senses, I've got a bunch of different possible ways rather than, well, you're out of hit points. But going after someone that your character cares about is just the dirtiest, most evilest trick. It's just such a great... Lil will beat me to the punch. And hey, Stacy, by the way, talking about the GM PC part, just so you know, Ed Greenwood did that with Elminster, and I heard about that on an excellent podcast called Sons of Cryo, so I know that you're in good company.
Oh, that's good.
It's pretty awesome when you talked about that on Sons of Cryo's podcast.
I can't avoid it because a lot of times I end up running games that I want to play because nobody that I know actually wants to run the game, and I don't think it's fair that I don't actually get to make a character.
You just said what I feel. So. I love games like Urban Shadows because there's actually a death move. There's a mechanic that incentivizes, or at least ice creams it. That, hey, your character dies, but there's this cool thing. You get to hand this hunter move to somebody else. You choose who gets this awesome thing, or you get to lay on a curse that somebody's nearby. So that's pretty cool. I like games that do that. Legend of the Five Rings also had a reward for dying honorably. That was pretty awesome. So, there are mechanics. There are games where the GM comes after your character and it's perfectly okay within the setting.
I'd like to add two quick things to that. One, in a lot of those world games, the players are rolling all the dice, right? And that feels very different,
Yeah.
right?
That
So
is
like
true.
it's not a situation where like the GM is like, roll a d20 and I know what the DC is and I'll let you know if you fail, and then they roll and they're like, oh, you're dead, and you're like, well, fuck, I rolled a 18, isn't that good? And you have no idea. In a lot of those games, you have the dice, and you could do that in like Dungeons and Dragons, right? You could just reverse it and say, okay, here's a die. In this situation where the stakes are so high, here's the DC. Let's make it very clear what's on the line. The second really quick thing is once you're comfortable no longer pulling punches, I like to kind of make it into kind of like a joke in the sense of like I'll take a blank character sheet, and if someone's about to make a roll where they could die, I'll put that blank character sheet next to them, and I'll be like, just in case, let's get ready right now.
Just prepping.
Yeah. It's a big deal. I mean, I remember playing Conspiracy of Shadows years ago with a guy who had never gamed with me before, and he ran into this fortress and like was doing all these shenanigans, and I started rolling dice for the guards, and I was rolling right in front of him on the table, and he physically started to sweat. Like he realized, oh wow, he's gonna butcher me. He's going to butcher my character, and I watched him really, and he got lucky, and then the dice worked out for him, and he got out of there. But it was interesting. It was an interesting. I mean, we should have had a talk before then, but anyway, it can be.
But there's an
very
interesting
visceral.
physicality of if you've been rolling in front of yourself, that when you get to those tense things, you could go, let's clear the table and start really putting it out in front of them. That's an interesting.
And I think the other thing to think about with death is really, really interesting. Think about worlds where magic exists and these very vocal gods exist. What happens when people die? That's an interesting thing. Cosmologically, you get to define a bunch, and you get to do it with a player there to see it firsthand. Death means a funeral, which is super interesting. It could mean a will. It can mean the family gets involved. It can mean all this cool stuff. Is there reincarnation? Suddenly there's all this neat. What happens if the adventurers, the adventurers have been adventuring with this guy for 10 levels, and then he dies, and then a priest comes up and says, "Listen, I know for a fact that your friend was reincarnated halfway across the world in a little village, not far from here. The signs are clear." And you can make death doesn't have to be like this boring thing. It can be super, super interesting story-wise. So there's not so don't I think that there can't be that fear that it's gonna bring everybody down. Good, not every adventure should be a happy rose petal filled. Sometimes it's gonna smell like pee, as we've ascertained from before.
Well, we talked about that before in a previous episode about the idea that if there is a death or some situation like that, that's an opportunity to go and talk to the player one-on-one and ask them what they want to have happen, how they want to change things up, and give them a real chance for input. I had a player, we did a Mutants Masterminds game, the player was playing Thor, they died at the end of the first campaign arc.
Nice.
And he came back as Thor, but actually it was Loki disguised as Thor, which set up the whole second one.
Yeah, that's nice. Cool. Summing up.
Yes, let us move to another foible.
What else? Who else has one they want to confront?
I have one. It's pretty simple. So a lot of times, actually similar to Rich, right? When you're describing things and you're playing your NPC and you might forget about the background, a lot of that is about what you are focused on in the moment, right? And depending on where your focus is, other things might kind of fall in the background. And I know for me, an issue I have is if I don't pay attention to the various NPCs I'm playing, they end up being very much like me, right? So if I don't think about them too much, they'll talk like me, or they might even look like me in my mind, right? And so a lot of times I have to put conscious effort and maybe have lists or write down, okay, this game we're playing, there's these kinds of people that exist in this world, and there's these kinds of different ages and different genders and different ethnic backgrounds that would exist. And I have to have lists, because if I just start talking, in my brain it's just me wearing different funny costumes.
Yeah.
We do we print out a tons of. I mean, I'll print out like about a couple hundred pictures from online, and people do this with the various NPC cards and things like that. And I have index card boxes of those for the different campaigns, and then the players will put together eventually a photo album. And I will say, having done that, the obvious thing is that it gives players go, okay, now I know what this person sort of looks like. But it's really helped me when they flip it open, when I say, okay, well, this person here is, Miyamoto Hitomi is there, whoever, and they flip open the book and they're looking at the picture and I'm looking at it and going, okay, I remember now, this is how I did that character before. And that's actually really helped me keep on track, because I will fall into that mode of doing the same voice, same person over and over again.
I use names as a key to help me remember how to portray a person. Like there was one NPC named Malik, and I named him so that I would remember to always speak with malice dripping from his voice.
The onomatopoeia approach to that? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was helpful for me. I love the idea of just a little tagline. So if you can kind of write a tagline for an NPC near their name to give you an idea, oh yeah, that was their attitude. Okay, that's cool. Or, real shorthand stuff like always wearing a certain type of color, or, I'm known as the hat guy. I have lots of hats for particular NPCs, as in literal hats, and that will help me a lot kind of embody the character, and that kind of pours it into not being my voice. So just some quick little tips that are, you have to buy a lot of hats, but who doesn't like hats?
Indeed.
Were we done with that one? That was pretty quick.
So John mentioned a couple things that perked up my ears. He said that they're all like him, and I thought one thing you can do is when you write down your notes is write down one way that they're not like you at all.
Oh, that's great.
Just write down things that make them different. I find that I'll have NPCs who are way too reasonable, so it like diffuses conflict. So I think John might do that too. So, but to have something about like what makes them unreasonable, or why are they unreasonable, so that they're not just these like I'm an orc, but let's talk this out. You don't want that to happen too much, and also the other thing you can do is have what can this NPC teach the players about the world? How can I use them to give some exposition or teach them something that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Nice. Good. Well, we're getting a little long in the tooth. Do we want to bring up one more foible and talk it through? Strash and Judd, you guys are pretty much flawless, evidently.
Flawless. I don't want to talk about kryptonite for 15 minutes. Oh shit.
Nice.
Oh no, he didn't. Strash, do you have any that you wanna jump in on?
So two things. One, the homework for this meeting was name your weakness and then tell us how you combat it. So I brought one of those, and I just wanted to answer that awesome question that we heard earlier, which was, how do you find out your greatest weakness? And so when I got invited to do this, the first thing I did when I was that I game with said, so what's my biggest weakness? So, that a lot of times our perspective is from within our own minds, and of course everyone dissects games afterwards and sort of thinks about what they could improve and maybe what they can bring to the next game to sort of like up their ante. But eventually you get to a point where sometimes it's not obvious to yourself. So getting an external point of view is very helpful, particularly if you have somebody that you trust who's got a lot of experience. But the thing that I'm going to talk about is I'm really bad at prep. So a lot of people talk about lonely fun. It's not very fun for me. Go ahead. You guys, take it away.
I hate prep. I can't stand prep. So I made it a rule that I only prep for 20 minutes. That's it. and I only prep for this one session for 20 minutes at a time, and then I prep for session after session after session just that way, and that way I don't hate prep. And then if I get really into something, like I really want to make a prop, and I spend a whole lot of time in Photoshop getting together this absolutely perfect prop, that's okay. But for the most part, it's just 20 minutes. That way I get down the base, the bare of exactly what I need to know, what's going on in the world, who the NPCs are, and how they actually are interacting with the characters and what's going on in the rest of the world. And it tends to work pretty well.
Yeah.
That's good.
I have cheat sheets that I use and I always keep it to an hour, and I'll switch up what cheat sheets I'm using to essentially fill out whether it's okay. Here are a list of NPCs. Here's a list of 3 things, 3 ideas for each player. Here's a triad sheet of different stuff, and I like switching around on those because A, it gives me something tactile that I can draw from later on. That's a refinement of having over-prepped for many, many years.
Repurpose existing materials. Jug was talking about running Burning Wheel, but using Paizo's Kingmaker campaign. So, like, there are a lot of different RPG worlds and adventures and scenarios and so on and so forth that you can grab and use as inspiration for whatever games you're running. You can also do that simply with TV shows or movies, right? Like you go to Wikipedia or various episode guides for various TV shows that are maybe in a similar thematic tone for whatever game you're running, and just quickly review a few of the plot points and a few of the characters, and that can kind of give you a quick idea in like 15 minutes or so what you could bring to the table for the game you're about to run.
You know, there's a related point on this. I got better about this when I actually went, what the hell am I actually using at the table?
Yeah, that's
What are
good
the
to
prep
know.
things? Yeah, because I was reading about somebody who was talking about, they had to run these games and they were doing what, wasn't this like 5 or 6 hours of prep, Rich, and then they were writing up the session afterwards and stuff, and I was like, how much of what you're doing is actually hitting the table? And as soon as I started cutting out the garbage that wasn't ending up in play, I got better about it. But, you know, and I'm still at an hour, I'm still wasting a lot of time there, but knowing what you're actually doing, I mean, because you don't have to prep if the prep isn't doing anything for you.
Yeah, I deal with prep by if I'm doing it, I have to have either I have to love it or I have to have something that I'm going to use it for. Like I remember I ran a Burning Wheel game in the Forgotten Realms, and I burned up a bunch of NPCs and made up a bunch of monsters and did all this stuff, and I was like, well, I'm learning aspects of the Burning Wheel system that I didn't really know about, and I wanted to do that anyway, so now I have an excuse to do it. So if I'm going to do prep, it has to be something that I'm never going to resent. You know, I just hear too many people who are like, oh, the game fell apart or something happened, and now I have all this prep. It's got to be something that I really just enjoy. I have to really love doing it. And if you don't love it, then I think, you know, Stacy's rule about cutting it down to 20 minutes and putting a timer on is brilliant. It's really, really good. I have an hour and a half each way commute on a train, so it's just super, super easy for me to find time to jot down notes about elves. But I can understand if that's the thing.
Orcs I can live with. Elves.
Well, it's interesting, right? So, like, when Lowell was talking about what do you actually use at the table, right? And Judd, you mentioned there are people who will like do all this material and then they feel resentful or they're like upset. It's always interesting to kind of zoom in and say what is really going on here, right? Like, is it someone doing tons of prep because they feel anxious? Are they doing tons of prep because they imagine this perfect thing in their mind and then they get pissed off when people don't, you know, magically read their mind and do the exact thing that they're thinking of doing? Are they playing one kind of game and their players are playing a completely different other game? Like, what's going on exactly, right? So go ahead.
I think a big part of that is that if you look around on the internet when people talk about prep, they talk about things like strategies on you know, not spending too much time on it or organizing your notes or whatever, these kind of things, but nobody ever tells you what you actually need to prep. what do you actually need to have ready? And I think a lot of people, and this happened to me, you know, at the very beginning, was you have no idea what you're actually going to need in a given game, and you have no idea what you actually should be prepping, so you try to do everything. Like, you know, the way that the town hall looks, and you know whether or not there's a circular square, or there's a fountain here, or you know all of these things that are like all these intrinsic details that you don't necessarily need in the game. It's just, I think it's hard when you're a beginning GM especially to know what is it that I really need to actually put together.
Right. Right. And a lot of that can be handled in the game pitch, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like a lot of prep can be circumvented by a lot of every GM problem in the entire world can be circumvented by really smart framing of character generation, which is, you know, just if you want to have a dungeon and you want them to go into the dungeon, say make characters that are going to be motivated to go into this dungeon. I'm not going to tell you how they're motivated. You tell me, and you know. That can help. I think prep it's an important issue because it's about time, and it's about how you spend your time and how you don't waste it, and it's a big deal. I think Strash's thing here is really interesting. It's bigger than just the end of this one episode. I feel like there's a lot of meat.
It's kind of like about the whole episode in a way, right? Like, so in some ways, when I think of prep, I think to myself, well, like, so Stacey, you mentioned, like, I don't know what I'm going to necessarily need to do in this game, so I kind of over-prep. But, like, let's say I know that I'm really good at making up certain kind of environmental details on the fly, so then I don't have to prep that because I know that I personally am good at that. But I know I'm terrible at coming up with names for characters, right? So if I know the things I'm not great at, then I could prep just those things, and I can say, okay, I need a name list, or I need this, or I need that, and then everything else, just I'll figure it out, or I'll ask help from the other players, or I'll just say, hey guys, this part I'm not so sure about. Let's end early, or help me out with this, and next time I'll like figure out what we need for that.
Let me ask you this: have any of you guys gotten jammed up because you hadn't prepped? You felt like you hadn't prepped something, and that was a problem at the table?
Yes.
Let me hop in here for one second. I'm blessed because I have an outstanding memory. So a lot of times I'm able to remember details from even like a year ago in the campaign. And so back in the day, I used to cheat and basically just not do prep, but like be able to. I taught myself how to improvise efficiently, how to use information that characters were feeding me or players were feeding me about their characters to sort of incorporate things and do things on the fly. But I've started playing no prep games a lot because it just suits my style a lot better. So that's a method of cheating. Don't play the games you don't want to prep for. But what I will tell you is that I've never actually felt that I got jammed up. The problem I run into is that sometimes it feels like I lose threads and the cohesiveness of things can sometimes fall apart. Because there are certain games where you can't avoid prep. Like if you're going to have a dungeon, you're going to need a dungeon. But like there's a lot of times where like if we're working on something and then we depart from it and head sort of like in a different direction, I'm going to forget that we had this storyline about a character's father, or that there's this thing that they were chasing and it's kind of important. So like over time you're going to start losing those threads. It goes back to the beginning of the conversation and the files and putting things in files in case it's going cold. But a lot of times I feel like I'm doing people a disservice because I haven't quite brought things together or like made things really firm that's part of prep, is going back over your notes and remembering what things were about.
I keep most of my notes in bullet point formats, kind of for that reason. One of the things that I like to do is if I have, for instance, one group that's acting secretly against another group, I'll have, I use OneNote a lot, so I'll have set up just like a little area, a little block for each NPC, and there will be bullet points for each one, and it's just kind of like, this is what these people have been doing, and this is what they've been doing in between the two sessions, and you usually don't have to actually put very much in there, just a couple little things, and then when I want to go back and actually see, okay, what happened last time, or what is it that they were doing, I usually have like this, it's almost like a timeline of just bullet points, and bullet points helps you keep it brief, because you don't really need to put a whole lot into it.
That's interesting. Because I do it by taking little scraps of paper that I jot on during the game and hiding them, or as we say in the library world, cataloging them all over my house, and then finding
Curating.
it's terrible. I really don't have a system for this yet, so I'm really interested to hear what people have to say, because I am not good at keeping game notes or something that, you know, I don't know. I don't have it yet. So
Arc notebooks.
What'd you say?
Arc notebooks. I'm gonna put it in chat.
So one of the things I do is I shaped my prep around the fact that I like playing characters. So I play a lot of relationship drama-driven games. And so what my prep is often just I'll mentally think, okay, well, here's this major player in this city. I'll only think about the things that have happened in the game. Well, what are they up to? Well, they've probably got their own drive or agenda. Let me kind of picture a few moments in their day and where could it possibly overlap with the player characters. Okay, I'll make a mental note. I might write a little something down there. And it's fun because I feel like I'm kind of playing a few characters in my lonely fun rather than working on maps or stat blocks and stuff like that. Makes my eyes glaze over, so I can't do it.
You know, it's funny you say that because where I feel that some of the weakness in sort of tied to prep is, man, do I hate statting bad guys. I hate statting combats, and I sometimes worry that my combats don't spark, or they're kind of the same a lot of the time because I am winging it for most of the combat stuff.
I hate combat.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like for things like combat and things that are stat heavy, I know that what I'll do is I'll just bust open a monster manual, and if, like, let's say there's an orc commander, then, like, it kind of doesn't really matter if the actual NPC I'm portraying is an orc or not. I really like the statistics that go with that character, right? And I'll just take that and change it. I find that repurposing things and reskinning them quickly can help a lot. The other thing that I tend to believe, and I don't know how common this is or if people like this, but for as far as I'm concerned, what most matters is what people remember. And what I mean by people, I mean the players. So at the beginning of every game, I ask everyone, what do they remember from last session, right?
And they actually answer you?
Yes.
That's miraculous. I ask that all the time, and people are like, you're supposed to tell us.
Oh my God!
So John threatens to kick people out of his game, Stacy.
That's true. Yeah, I
John's a badass.
Well, so I mean, part of that might be training, right? So if players are not used to certain things, and maybe the first 2-3 times we do it, it doesn't really work so well. But through repetition, it could help. Also by giving them tools, like, so for example, I always really like to pair a verbal request with something physical because I feel like it reinforces it. So I'll pass blank index cards to everyone and say, hey, write down one thing you remember from last session, right? Or write one thing that you were most excited about, or write one thing that a question we haven't answered yet. And I'll have everyone write that, and then I'll collect it. And since they weren't talking it out with each other, I might get a bunch of repeats, which is great because that gives me an idea of what everyone's actually interested in. So if I keep doing that session to session and then use that as a catalog all of that, I'll have a chain of events, chain of questions, indications of what players are interested in to build off on. And if interest in certain things fades away, then I don't care anymore. I'm just like, whatever, this was cool 5 sessions ago, people don't care, they don't remember, they're just going to remember they had a good time then, and as long as I focus on what will give them a good time now, that's what I care about.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Sam Dillon does it, kind of flips it up. He actually asks people at the end of the session, he goes, okay, at the end of the session, okay, what are your guys' goals right now, personal and group, and has them define at the end of the session so that he has that for prep for the following session.
Nice.
That'll change. Sometimes that'll change. People will reflect, and sometimes you'll prep, and they'll go in a completely different direction. Yeah. I'll actually throw one more thing into the pot here. The most important thing about combats is to make them exciting, because it's less important whether your stat block is well balanced and interesting, and it's more important whether the monster is memorable and the people get to do something cool. So don't forget the scenery. Give people stuff that they can jump off of and do cool stuff with, and make sure that you take moments to spotlight the action. Like sometimes maybe it's not just the swing; it's how badass they look while they're doing it, or what sort of like desperate gamble they're throwing in. So yeah, I mean your stat block can be as epic or as boring as you want, as long as you make that fight like totally memorable and sweet, and like a great action sequence. That's what people are going to remember.
Yeah.
That's another place I like to employ smells.
In the middle of an attack. That's interesting.
Oh,
Well,
Pee?
and the grossness of certain things, like you destroy that being so much that now you're covered in gray matter and little bones, and I'm kind of disgusting, actually. I think I have a fascination with that.
Just rename Precious Dart to Precious Viscera.
Wow.
Judd, what's your biggest GMing foible or flaw?
I think my biggest one that I've never gotten over fully yet is dungeons, and I've gone through all these different stages of life with how I've dealt with it. When I was a kid, I would just run cool city adventures because I liked making up cities, and I didn't like dungeons. So I would just make up cool cities with all these competing factions and all this crazy stuff going on, and the players would be like, "When are we going in a dungeon?" And I was like, "I don't know. When you get out of this city trouble, I guess, jerk." So I would just make up cool cities. And then as I got older, I made a classic dungeon DM mistake where I looked at my weakness and I decided that games that played to that weakness were stupid and not as good as the games that I liked. So I just poo-pooed on dungeons, which sucks. It's just stupid. So don't do that. Don't be that guy. And then now I've come full circle, and I'm kind of fascinated by dungeons, and I'm not good at making them. I'm not good at making this kind of finite space that has elements of the cities that I like to make, but also this kind of restrictiveness and danger and something worth going in there and risking your life for, but also maybe something puzzly. Like there's like a mixture, there are all these kind of different ways to cook them up, and I'm just not real good at it. I think that, anyway, any help or thoughts are great.
Do you feel like you have analysis paralysis, like you have too many choices and you don't know what you want to actually put in there?
No, I can come up with ideas all day. It's just more about mapping them out or finding an online map that works. Or
what do you feel dissatisfied by? Like when you run a dungeon you come up with, after you do it, what do you sit there and think like, wow, this part sucked, or I really didn't like this, or what?
I'm satisfied when the players deal with a problem in a way that I never expected, and the dungeon just looks totally different than how they left it. And I say, what the hell, when there's some element of it that they just never really brushed up on and didn't really care about. And you know what? I think I probably have to just make peace with that. It's just like, well, if you make a dungeon, the players are going to bypass rooms sometimes because, I think, I don't know. That could just be something I need to get over.
Maybe just not get too attached to them or to your ideas.
Right. Absolutely.
I hate. I'm with you 100% because I hate mapping and figuring out the rooms and doing all the little bits, and it always feels like a lot of wasted effort. But there was a panel that I heard that Will Hindmarch did on spatial construction of areas and making areas come to life and areas as stories, and he showed a couple of dungeons, and he showed how they could form like an act structure. That the first part of the dungeon could cover a certain one act, and I hadn't thought about it that way at all. And it was much more global than it was sort of zoomed in on individual parts of it.
Right. Tor Olafsrud made Torchbearer. He wrote Torchbearer, and he had some really interesting things that kind of broke some of my paralysis, which is that there are elements of my old city games that fit right in with a dungeon, right? if the best dungeons are kind of this teetering ecology that's kind of right on the edge of the precipice of total chaos, and the players walk in and they're the fuse that lights it off. And thinking of it that way helps a bit. I'm still not over it. I'm still not perfect, but it's still a weakness. It's not as strong as my other stuff, but that helped because that was like, oh, okay, it's just like my old cities, so that helped.
For me, it's cities. I like cities because there are repercussions for the players, and I think that's a little bit what you're getting at there. That there are consequences for players, so they can't, shit where they have to sleep. And I wonder if there's some way to bring that to a dungeon.
But
Strauss, I feel like you have something you want to say.
I totally have a thing I want to say. Actually, I'm going to play show and tell. So I've got these really cool little tiles. They're dungeon morph cards. I saw somebody use them at GOT at Gen Con one year, and I picked them up, and they've totally changed my approach to dungeons. So one of the cool things about these is that geomorphs are able to sort of click in. So you can attach any card to any other card, and it'll work. It'll make sense, like that you can flow from one to the other. So one of the things that these particular cards do, I think they were like $15 or something. One of the things that's super cool about these is you can deal out a bunch, or you can sort of group them. Like they have like groupings for crypts and groupings for outdoorsies and things like that. And so you can deal out like a bunch and put them together, and it'll give you sort of like a map layout. And sometimes I'll ask myself questions like, why did somebody put a tomb there? Or like, this looks like a room that probably has like some giant like forge in the middle of it, and it's like a a colossal thing. And so like as you start kind of dealing them out, you sort of start telling yourself a little bit of a story, and it works. And one of the great things about this is like particularly in Dungeon World, I don't actually know a lot of the time what the dungeon is going to be about. So if somebody says like, oh well, let us go and find the sword of of Turin, the paladin of whatever, then one of the things that's super cool about it is like I can take the same map and I can sort of like reskin the story and start adding elements from the story into it.
Yeah.
Because like a map is a map. It's just like rooms, right? So yeah. I guess I don't know if you guys do show notes, but I'll see if I can. This I have nothing to do with this company. I just like their product, so I'll give a little blurb and shout out for them. I did not make them myself. These are I actually bought these. You can order them online, and
they do the dice as well, right?
I'm sorry. Say again.
They do dice as well for that series.
Yeah, but I
Dungeon
found that
Works,
the
right?
dice don't work so great at a table. I find that if I have to improvise the dungeon on the fly, you set down a card, and then when they clear it or they go through it or whatever, you can deal out 2 or 3 more. And I find that having that on the table, particularly in a size category, I bought a couple of PDFs that have the same idea that you can print out, and I just put them on cardstock and have a little stack that I take with me to the cons. Yeah, they do dice as well, but I find they don't work as well because you can't just make a little map where people can put people on top of the card and you can just play right through it. So
That's
nice.
So,
That's nice. I'll pick those up.
Something I do, which is I also always had issues with dungeons. I don't find them as interesting, and I've always really loved cities. One thing that I started doing, which I've really liked, inspired by The Walking Dead, right? So when I think of The Walking Dead, like modern day society overrun in a post-apocalyptic situation where there's zombies everywhere, right? So I like to think of things as, let me take a location, right? It could be a city, it could be a small town, it could be a hospital, it could be anything, right? So take a location that's not a dungeon and then bury it, right? So take it, bury it underground, and have it overrun by like the undead or like remnants of the past or invaders or whatever it might be. But as long as I focus on what it used to be and then fast forward like a year or two after it's been decaying for a while and ramp that up, it really helps me focus on a distinct look and feel, to come up with threats very easily, to tie everything together. It doesn't feel like a bunch of random rooms. These are all part of something much larger that used to exist. You can actually feel the history as you're going in through this. And I don't know, it feels really, really nice when we've been playing that style.
Nice. The other way I deal with it is I make up a bunch of random tables that will give me enough info to make a dungeon and stat a dungeon, and I just roll a bunch of stuff and I see what I get.
Yeah.
I did it for a while for a Lamentations of the Flame Princess game, where the players were these monster hunter. Well, they were part of the Delving Guild or the Delving Union, and when monsters who had lived in the city peaceably for over a century were outlawed, the members of the union could go into their houses and pretty much take their shit, willy-nilly. It was just the law. So if like people had a post from the city, from the civil, the civic folks, I don't want to get too much into tell me about your character, but that the players could knock down doors and kill whoever was in it. So I had a bunch of tables that I would roll, and that's how I would say what kind of monster it was, and it was really, really fun. That was cool. Morally repugnant, but cool. And I guess I didn't realize how morally repugnant until we played about 7 sessions. And I was like, I can't do this. It's too awful. You're all too awful. Why would you kick down those doors? And they're like, you told us to, you jerk. So it was kind of funny that I made a game that I just couldn't stomach. I couldn't do it. But anyway, that's the other way I deal with this is random tables that give enough to inspire me and give enough to give me stats and hit points and the good stuff.
Frog God Games Tome of Adventure Design is really awesome for that. It's one of the best toolkits for random tables on that. Really
How to Host the Dungeon by Tony Dowler is another good one.
Oh, nice. Okay. I've been flirting with How to Host a Dungeon for years, so I just needed an excuse to kind of.
You need to commit. It's a fun little game.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, folks. That was fun. That was nice to talk through.
Well, I think we should stick a fork in it. We have solved all of your problems, each other's problems, so that's good. Now we're
Problem free.
help others. So we did not receive any Q&A this time around, probably because it was such juicy content, and hopefully everybody found at least something that you can learn from. We do love to hear from you. So please ask any of us a question on Google+, a number of us are on Twitter. This Imaginary Life is it's really out to try to help everybody tackle the problems at their table. So anything we can do to help you out, please do let us know. And I didn't say this at the outset, but I'm going to insert it before it's uploaded. But this episode is also going to be part of the Indie Plus community. So the Indie Plus, it does adhere to the standards set forth by Indie Plus. And if you have any questions about that, check out indieplus.org. And you've already heard that we did have a little bit of a curse words or two, but nothing that you couldn't hear on FX. So, how can you complain about that?
Sorry,
fair
don't telling me.
That's
No,
me.
there was quite a few.
Were there?
Quite a few.
Swore like sailors.
So, thank you, John. Thank you, Judd. Thank you, Lowell. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Strash. Everybody, I really appreciate you coming on. And we will go ahead and call it a night.
Bye, world.